Have you ever wondered what a homeowners association or HOA even does, or if it's even worth the fees? HOAs are super prevalent in Florida. A lot of communities have homeowners associations and HOA fees, but a lot of people have a lot of misconceptions about them. So what I want to do today is break down some of the things they do and some of the things they don't do so that people have a better understanding of HOAs and you can decide if living in an HOA community makes sense for you. We know that HOAs can play a big factor when people are deciding to move to the area, and the fees associated with them, they want to make sure they're getting value for money. And the truth is, HOAs are all so vastly different, but there are some common things as well. So let's break down some of those things today, talk a little bit more about it, and you guys will leave this video knowing a little bit more about it and whether it might be something you would consider. So we want to make sure that one, you understand what you're paying for, and two, you understand what you're missing out on if you're not in an HOA community. So without further ado, let's dive into the video and get right to it. Hi guys, Ross Hardy from the Hardy team at RE/MAX here in Spring Hill, Brooksville, Wesley Chapel area of Florida. And I've been selling homes here for 20 years and we help hundreds of families every single year make the move to the area. So if you're sitting there considering doing the same thing, please be sure to reach out to us, whether you're 9 days away or 99 days away. We love answering any types of questions from people just like you. There's never a bad time to start doing your research. So be sure to reach out to us at the phone number below here. You can do a Zoom call, you can text or email us. Doesn't really matter as long as you reach out to us with your questions so you're not sitting there asking things in your head that we can be solving pretty easily for you. Now let's dive into this topic about the HOAs, and I'm going to come back with you later and let you know some of the other ways we can benefit you. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is highlight the key features in what the HOA does in a community. So the homeowners association is really there for two main purposes, I would say. Now, the first one is going to be enforcing the deed restrictions or the community regulations. And that's really what people kind of think of when they think of HOAs. They say, well, they're the rules police and they're going to make me do this and do that. And we hear all sorts of things like that. We hear people say all the time, man, it's full of people who are not important enough in their regular lives, so they retire to Florida and now they want to feel super important. So they go around making everybody's life a misery. And there are some HOAs that are very, very strict. No doubt about it. But most HOAs are really pretty reasonable, and there are deed restrictions in place for a reason. They're merely there to enforce them. So make sure that you read the deed restrictions for the communities that you're interested in before you purchase a home in there. Because again, they're very, very different. There's homeowners associations that don't allow people to park on the street overnight, or you're not allowed to park commercial vehicles on the driveway at all. There's certain HOAs where you're not allowed to park RVs on the driveway overnight. And there's HOAs where they're really, really strict about maintaining the cleanliness of the sidewalks or your driveway or the mailbox. So again, different levels of HOAs, but the one thing they do in there is they are there to kind of police them, I guess, but really just enforce the regulations that are in place that you should know about before you move into that community. And then the number two reason that the HOA is there is to make sure that there are funds and budgeting available to maintain the community amenities. So that can be a number of things, but it's primarily taking care of the common areas. So if you're in a community that has a community pool, if it has tennis courts, fitness center, anything like that, there has to be a budget in place to make sure that when the pool starts leaking or needs resurfacing or the gym equipment malfunctions, that stuff can be maintained and replaced. So it's up to the HOA board to go in there, set budgets for those things, and then to make sure that those things are properly maintained and taken care of. Just imagine that you move into a beautiful community, excited to take care of all of the amenities, and then within a year or two, the roof starts leaking on the clubhouse and there's no money budgeted to replace it, and all of a sudden they have to close the thing down. It's going to be a nightmare, right? So it's a very, very complicated procedure. Some HOAs even have to maintain the roads in there as well, so making sure that those are properly budgeted for is going to be super important. So those are the two primary functions of a homeowners association: to make sure that the common areas and the amenities are kept up with, maintained, and even improved and built upon in a number of cases, and then to make sure that the rules and regulations are strictly adhered to. Now, I want to break down some of the misconceptions that people might have about HOAs. Now, number one, I already touched on it briefly, is that they are the HOA police or something like that. Remember, when you come into these communities, you are signing up legally binding contracts that you are agreeing to abide by these deed restrictions and regulations. So if you don't want to do that, don't move into those communities in the first place. Make sure you read them thoroughly, make sure you go through them with your real estate agent and you understand exactly what you're signing up for. I've had some horror situations over the years where I got a phone call one day from somebody who lived in the community that I was living in at the time that we do a lot of business in. Now, we did not sell this person this house, I hasten to add. But they called me and said, I'm looking to get a price on my property. Can you come out and take a look at it for me? I got the address, I go and start doing my research online, and I actually see that the property is under contract already. So I reach back out to the seller and say, hey, I see your property is actually already listed and it's under contract. He says, no, that must be an old listing. I actually just closed on the house yesterday. So I said, well, why would you be looking to sell it already if you just closed on it yesterday? He says, come on over and I'll explain everything. So I go over to his house and he proceeds to go on a 5-minute rant session about how he brought his RV into the community the day they moved in, parked it on the driveway. They were cleaning it and their intention was to leave it on the driveway overnight so they could take it back to the storage facility the next day, only to be slapped with an HOA violation. The agent who sold them the house had not properly disclosed the deed restrictions and hadn't told them that it wasn't allowed in that community. Well, they are such avid RVers that that was a breaking point for them and they decided they wanted to sell the house right away. Now, is it the HOA's fault? Are they being the police force in that instance? No, it's an HOA deed restriction that the owner wasn't aware of or wasn't made aware of. So HOAs can get a bad rep sometimes. However, they're really just doing their job. Now, another misconception about homeowners associations is that they're trying to rob the residents and keep upping fees with no increase in services. And again, I can't speak for every single homeowners association, but I will tell you that the ones I've been living in, and I've lived in 3 different ones at this point, have not been that way at all. Now, HOA fees do, in general, continue to go up year upon year. There's certainly very, very few cases where they go down in price, right? However, I've lived in communities where, yes, they've upped the HOA fees kind of incrementally and by small amounts, but then they've added additional features. So they completely refurbished a gymnasium in one of them and built it out and extended it. In another one of the HOA communities I lived in, they actually built a kids' playground and barbecue area with covering as well. And then in the other one, the HOA dues went up, but they included cable TV and internet into the package that was considerably cheaper than if you were buying them as standalone options by yourself. So I don't think it's a matter of HOAs trying to rob you. If you look at what you get in these communities for the price that you're paying, it's actually extremely reasonable in most cases. And some HOAs also have additional maintenance fees for villas, but again, the service that you're getting is very, very reasonable for the price. So I'll take Silverthorne for an example, where for $130, $145 a month, you get your yard cutting, the bush trimmed, the mulch, the fertilization, and they paint the exterior of the home every 7 or so years. Now, when you consider that I pay $110 just to have my yard cut every single month, you can see how reasonable that is over the course of time, because of course they're buying those services in bulk for the 300 or 400 villa homes that are in there. So be sure that you understand the HOA fees, but also what they include, because if they're including cable and internet, you're likely getting a very, very good deal on your homeowners association dues. So those are the 2 most common misconceptions that I see, but I want to talk about some of the benefits and some of the disadvantages of living in a homeowners association community. So let's start with the benefits. Now, the most common benefit that I hear and the most praise I get from customers that we sell homes to in HOA communities is that all of the homes are kept up nicely. No doubt you've been driving around in certain areas sometimes where you have gorgeous, gorgeous homes, and then all of a sudden there's 1 or 2 homes that are just a wreck. There's a bunch of beat up old vehicles up on bricks that people are working on all the time, and there's 27 Rottweilers in the yard, and the homes just make the other homes around them look shabby. The idea of being in an HOA is that you really don't get that. There's some sort of uniformity across all of the properties, and the idea is they're all kept up to a certain level, which will, in theory, again, increase your home values and keep them at a maximum. So again, one of the real benefits of being in an HOA is knowing that there's going to be some sort of uniformity, knowing that the people either side of you or across from you are not going to be doing wacky stuff to the home that's outside of the realms of what the HOA allows. Again, there's certain circumstances where we drive around and we see a home that's painted on the exterior in some hot neon pink. And while that might be great for your friends to locate which home is yours from a mile away when they're trying to visit you for the first time, maybe not the thing that you want to see out your window when you wake up in the morning every single day. So Again, most homeowners associations have a color palette that you choose from of approved colors when you're painting the exterior of a home. And again, it's to make sure that there's some uniformity and that people are not doing things that's going to be detrimental to your home value or to the community. Now, like I said, one of the other additional benefits are that when they start bundling in stuff like phone, cable, internet, you're typically getting a considerably better deal than you would be if you shopped for those things by yourself. Cable and internet has got super expensive in the last few years, and I don't see the prices going down any. So again, when they're shopping that at bulk for the whole community, the HOAs get massive discounts on those, and they pass that along to the residents where there's a real benefit to be being had. I will say the one thing that I miss not being in an HOA now is that having to pay for YouTube TV and the internet every single month is already about 70 or 80 bucks more than what our HOA dues were for the entire thing when we lived in the previous home, and there's no community pool or amenities either. So again, don't discount the value of having those services bundled in and the benefits that you get from the homeowners association packages. And again, I just touched on it briefly, but one of the other huge benefits of an HOA community are the amenities. So if you're trying to save money on your purchase and you really want a pool, but you maybe can't stretch your budget far enough, most of these communities have gorgeous pools. Some of them are absolutely like resort style pools you might find at some of the resorts in Orlando. They are spectacular and would pretty much alleviate the need for you needing to have your own pool. Then there's tennis courts, kids playgrounds, basketball courts. There's fitness centers and gyms, which can save you 40, 50 bucks a month on membership. There's clubhouses where they have social groups, playing cards, doing knitting, doing other activities, aerobics, book clubs. The options go on and on and on. Some of these communities have 40 or 50 social clubs that you can join in and kind of be members of. So the camaraderie in communities like that, there's always something to do. There's community features and benefits that you may look for either in your own home with a pool or outside of, like a gym, that again are included inside the community. And then one of the other benefits I'm going to touch on is that again, a number of these communities have restaurants or bars inside of them. So again, that can be a real focal point for the community where if you're moving there and you don't know people from the area, go to the local bar or restaurant inside of the community and meet some of the residents and make friends super, super quickly. That was actually one of my parents' main criteria when they moved here from the UK, was that they wanted to be in a community that had a restaurant and bar so they could enjoy the social aspect, not have to drive miles and miles to get to it, but also get to make friends and get to know people in the community much quicker. So those are some of the real benefits of being in the HOA, but what are some of the negatives? Well, let's start with, again, the deed restrictions and the enforcement of them. While it's a great idea in concept, I've had two particular situations in my own experiences which have been very, very difficult to deal with. So let me touch on them real briefly. The first one was my first home that I ever bought. Now, the homes in there were built in 2005, 2006. So as many of you might remember, 2007, 2008 saw the crash of the real estate market in the US, but in Florida, we were hit particularly hard. So a lot of those homes became vacant and were going into foreclosure. And it just so happened that one of the homes that was going into foreclosure was my next door neighbor. So the yard was never being maintained. The grass, if there was grass, I should say weeds, was literally 2 feet high. And what would happen, of course, is that the wind would blow and cross-pollinate all sorts of stuff into my yard, where I'm paying hundreds of dollars per month for fertilization and to get it mowed, only to have my grass being eaten away and to have sorts of fungicide, and I'm keeping my house looking beautiful while the one next door to me does not. Well, imagine my shock and horror when I get a letter through the mail from the Homeowners Association saying I need to jet wash, pressure wash my mailbox because it's dirty. Now, while I understand that was part of something that I signed up for, I'm straight on the phone to the management company saying, why the heck are you on my butt for having my mailbox being dirty when the house next door to me literally looks like a jungle and it's the ugliest eyesore to look at every single time I come home. So the continuity and making sure that everybody lives by the same rules sometimes doesn't always play out in practice. So that's one disadvantage. And then the second one is going to be around those pre-approved palette colors. So again, I bought a house in a HOA community one time that was a fire damaged house. It had pretty much burned to the ground. So I undertook to completely rebuild this thing, and it was a great opportunity for me to be in the community I wanted to while building a home to my own specifications. Well, as you can imagine, it was quite an eyesore doing the demolition and making sure that everything was hauled away. So we did have some dumpsters on our driveway, and some of the residents were complaining to the HOA that it was an eyesore for them. So the one thing we were waiting to do was to get the roof on the property. But because of the way that the HOA deed restrictions work, you have to go through the Architectural Review Committee. That being said, what you do is you submit a shingle to the Homeowners Association Architectural Review Committee. They look at it and say, yes, this meets the standard and specifications and colors of what we allow. Then they give you written approval to go ahead and get the roof put on. Well, the problem is they only meet once per month. So I had a call from the roof company who said, we just had a last minute cancellation. We can start on your roof next month. So I rush over to the HOA office with a sample of the shingle, hand it in to them and say, hey, can we start next week? They said, well, no, sorry, you can't do that because we're not meeting for another 3 weeks. They said, well, I literally took this shingle from the book that you provided me. It's the exact manufacturer and the exact color that you allow. Wouldn't you agree? Yes, we would. And you're going to approve it, right? Yes, we're going to approve it. But you're telling me I can't start for another 3 or more weeks now because you've already met, and I now have to reschedule this roofer when you're already getting complaints from the neighbors that there's an eyesore and I'm trying to solve the problem. Yes, that's what we're saying. So imagine my frustration in that situation. Again, I understand it's the rules and I'm not looking to bend them, but it's just one of the frustrations that you might experience being in a community like that. That being said, I do feel that on the balance of things, being in an HOA community is beneficial for a lot of people, and I did enjoy my time living in those communities. It's just that those are a couple of the frustrations that I did experience while being there. And then some other drawbacks might be things like pet restrictions or fencing restrictions. So if all of a sudden you decide that you want a dog for the family, and you want to get a fence, some of these communities don't allow fences. And it wasn't a big deal to you when you bought a property there, but all of a sudden it is. Or that you have 2 or 3 dogs, but you want to add 1 or 2 more maybe, but there's a restriction on the number of dogs allowed or the types of breeds. So just consider all aspects when you're moving into an HOA community. Try and think forward as to what might happen if you're growing your family or downsizing or certain things you might want to do along the way. Sometimes these things pop up that are never a consideration at the time that all of a sudden bring added frustration down the line. Hey guys, Ross Hardy from the Hardy team at Remax. If you're getting value from this video, please do a couple of things for me. Please like the video. Please comment down below and let me know, have you ever lived in an HOA community? And what's your experience been? And then subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you can be kept up to date with all the videos we make like this, as well as new home tours and talking about pros and cons of living in certain areas. We help over 200 families just like you relocate to the Tampa Bay area in Spring Hill, Brooksville, Wesley Chapel, Land O'Lakes, Lutz, and all those surrounding areas. And we would love to help you with any questions that you have. That's all I'm gonna say. Let's get back into the final part of the video. Okay guys, so with all of that said, how do you evaluate if being in a homeowners association community is right for you? Well, it's a tricky process, right? And you're free to bounce ideas off of us and ask us any questions that you have, but I would think about 3 main things here. I would think about 1, are you someone who likes to maintain their property in a certain way and is okay with conforming with that? If you're somewhat of a free spirit or you like doing kind of real wild things with the yard, planting extra trees, bushes and stuff, you're gonna have to get association approval for that. So if you really like to be like that, maybe the homeowners association community is not gonna be right for you. On the flip side, if you love that uniformity and you wanna make sure that all of the homes around you are maintained to a certain level, the HOA might be a good fit for you. Second of all, analyze whether the cost of the homeowners association is going to give you benefit. I've had customers come to me saying, you know what, we really love our house and we do love the community, but we never used the pool, we never used the clubhouse, and we just sat down and thought to ourselves, what are we paying $150 a month for? So make sure you are going to get your money's worth and get the benefits from them. Like I said, it's not just the pools and gyms and fitness centers and tennis courts. It's also the TV, it's also the internet and stuff like that. There's a whole thing to look at to make sure it's going to be right for you, but consider the cost versus the benefit for you. And then lastly, ask yourself, where are you going to be 5, 10, 15 years from now? And does that still fit with what you're looking to do if you're planning on being in that home for that long? So again, I'm talking about maybe having kids and looking to add a trampoline to the backyard. Well, I've been in that situation where we moved into a community, loved the house and everything else. And then when COVID kicked in and we're at home, all of a sudden the kids are like, we want a trampoline for the yard. Well, lo and behold, we weren't able to add one in that community. Again, I already mentioned the example of getting dogs and not being able to put fences in or not being able to get more dogs or certain breeds of dog. not being able to park your RV or boat on the driveway overnight if you're planning on using that extensively. So make sure that you are planning for the future and you understand completely what the HOA rules and regulations entail. And then finally, one thing I will say is that just recently there's been 1 or 2 communities which have been a little bit volatile in undergoing presidential changes and leadership changes, and it's really left a sour taste within the community. And while I believe that's being resolved now with new leadership based on the conversations I'm having with customers who live in there, it was a really unpleasant time to live through. So be aware that there are certain things that are outside of your control that no matter how pleasant you think it is in a community, things can turn on an absolute dime, and all of a sudden you find yourself in this really weird environment where it's very unpleasant to be a part of. Now guys, if you have any questions about homeowners association communities, what certain communities charge, what those charges include, be sure to reach out to us. We're happy to answer any questions. But for now, I hope you finished this video with more information than when you started. I'm Ross Hardy from the Hardy team. It's time to love where you live.